All right, Brian. Yeah, thanks a lot for
Yeah.
explaining what making is a lot, and it's interesting. Yeah, you just can't buy a one size fits all, kind of a program because that's not how people are, right? We're all individuals, and we have diversity, and we got to really differentiate instruction. So, what you said really spoke to me there. So, but where did you get this inspiration from to do this? Like, when did you realize yourself that coding, for example, had the potential to change and impact students and learning? Was that something personal that happened to you when you were
Mm.
younger, or do you have an epiphany, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah. Yes.
Next
The
question.
I think it was so I'm 46. So when I was in elementary school, Apple II came out and was being placed in schools here in California. I grew up in Santa Monica, and there was only one. There was one in the classroom, and I was already familiar with it because my dad was into gadgets. He had no idea how to use a computer, but he always just bought them. In 1977, we had the Bally Astrocade. Love that thing. It was amazing. So that was my first computer, and then we got the Apple II at home, and then the school started having them. And it was the fact that we had the in school that changed things for me. We used Apple logo. I was like, I was an elementary school kid using Pappert's logo. I had no idea, of course, who Seymour Papert was at the time, and or Cynthia Solomon or anybody, Alan Kane, like all these great people who were so involved. Brian Silverman, who have now I've now later have come to know them, and they're so influential, brilliant. But so we were making a game, and we because it was the '80s, and we called the game Star Wars, and because that was the most original name we could come up with, and we basically were doing some fan fiction. We didn't know what fan fiction was, but we just thought, wouldn't it be cool if? And so we started trying to program a wouldn't it be cool if auxiliary story to Star Wars, and we were all reading the Choose Your Own Adventure books at the time, doing all those like magic pen, game books and things like that. Like right, so it was like just amazing. Garbage Pail Kids were coming out, and the Jolly Ranchers it was like Pac Man, Galaga, like it was amazing. So of course, all the Dungeons and Dragons stuff was in the mix. It was like a really rich period, and not having internet to distract us and like keep us like we were really in order to use a computer, like you had to really kind of do stuff together with it. Like even if it was just like these funny little games, Castle Wolfenstein, 1981, like that was was on Apple II, unbelievable.
Love that game.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm
So
49, so your story is speaking loud and clear to me. I get
right,
that
Load
you
Runner,
got it
remember
too, or too
Load
young for that,
Runner?
but
Yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah, Load Runner was
good
was really
times.
yeah. Like we so there was so much that was happening, and so we just I had no idea that I was really in the thick of it, but I was in the thick of it, and then when I became a teacher, I started young at 23. So that was 19. Let's say I guess it was like late 90s, 96, 97, right in there. Um, you know, Kids just wanted to do stuff like and I was like, well, I was a kid who did stuff, so I totally got what that meant. And everything that I was doing already like had no relevance to the school curriculum. Like that I was when I was a kid, like I do my work, but like all the stuff I really cared about like was not what I was being asked to do by my teachers. Um, and then of course I had some teachers who always were encouraging and like pushing us to like, oh yeah, you want to program the computer, great, like go ahead, like, oh, okay, cool, so we'll stay in here every spare minute and make our Star Wars game. And it probably took us, I don't know, 3 months to make like a single graphic, and it was we were so proud of ourselves. And so that I just carried that forward as a teacher, and just knew that when I had students at Santa Monica High School, where I started as a full-time teacher, like I knew what they meant. And so I had all the things that we were teaching. I was always bringing stuff in that to help enhance what we would do in our traditional curriculum. But there was still something missing. There was always something missing, and it was always built on their interest and their voice and their desire to put stuff out there. Because by that time everyone was like, internet and Napster and like trying to find MySpace and trying to find new ways to like get your art into the world, like your message publishing, the read write web. Before it was before there was Web 2.0, like we were all trying to do that, and the kids were all about that. And so we built a radio station, and it wasn't in the curriculum. There was no class for it. There was no space for it. There was no money for it, but we did it anyway. And how do we do that? Like we just figure it out. It's like, okay, we have a big goal. Okay, so what do we? And so every step along the way was just so natural and so easy because it was hard work. It wasn't like it was easy to come up with, but it was hard work. And it was computer based. It was web based radio station. I had like a whole group of. Then now it was the most fascinating thing because I had all these different kids from all these different cliques on campus, and there's big school. It's over 3,000 kids, Santa Monica High School, and for as diverse as the school is, racially and socioeconomically, like everyone, and as much as like we as teachers worked on, diverse, equity, inclusion, curriculum, and et cetera. At lunchtime, most kids sat with quote their own group, and the radio station was one of the only things that brought everyone together, and it wasn't even like. We didn't even have to try. It wasn't like we messaged it or like wrote it into what we wanted to do. It was just so natural because like, well, who wouldn't want to work on this? Like, who wouldn't want to show up and help? Like, okay, I'm good at this, or you have that role. I can advertise, I can draw, great. Like, I can program, I can code, great. Like, I'm interested in sound mixing, awesome. Like, I'm interested in sound editing, cool. Like. I just want to play my guitar. I just want to play my drums. I just want to read my poetry. I just want to combine, this and that. Like it was just like mind blowing. So, like to me, it wasn't just like making, right? Like that was like my extreme making. That was like the extreme maker space because it was makers of all kinds that were all making at different paces, at different capacities, but still towards one goal that was bigger than all of us, right? And so like it was beyond. So that taught me a lot. That really taught me a lot. And I was young, like I was just like really beginning, like what? How? Like this school can be this, right? And then, I had great administration. You need great leadership at a school. You have to have leadership who's willing to say yes. You need somebody at the top who says, this sounds amazing and I'm sure it's going to work because you're so excited, and just let me know how it goes. Like, let's talk in 6 weeks. Like, you need somebody like that. If you have leadership that's like, well, this doesn't really fit in with the curriculum, like well, right, that's the point. Like that's why we're doing this, because there's no place for it, and yet there's a need for it, right? So, that kind of stuff just taught me so much. And then from there, like all my other experiences were just like constantly trying to mix up programming and computers and audio, video, and narrative and story building, game making. Like like I always like whenever there's something where kids are being asked to express themselves. Like, yeah, I taught them how to write and read critically and become, better skilled in those specific disciplines. But I'm also always and what else can we do? Right there, that's what I think the questions have to always be asked. Like, well, what else can we do? Like, what other ways can we ask students to express themselves? And nobody should have to give up anything in order for that to happen. Like that's where I think that's because we're trying to be so efficient, right? We're trying to be so proper and correct, trying to follow the rules so much, like we don't really give ourselves credit. It's like, well, what do you mean? Of course, you're going to write all the essays and read all the books and do all the math problems. That'll be fine. That's all going to fall into place. But what other bigger goals can we pursue that allow us to do all these things plus a whole bunch of other things that we didn't even consider because we were so locked into, well, this is English class or this is math class, and like, I don't know, I've never understood that. Like that part just, that starts to tear away at like the arbitrary rules of school. Like, why is a bell ring at a certain time? Like, why am I taking this class before another class? And like, why are most of the students in this class the same age as me? Right? Like, why do grades come out every 6 weeks? Like, that's why,
Exactly.
right? So we have to start asking those questions so we can undo the restrictions and then start to get at, okay, well, now that we've undone some of the restrictions, let's start pursuing some bigger goals with kids, right? That's yeah, you got me all wound up here. I love
No,
it.
that's great. You should come and be a guest speaker in our class. This is perfect. I'm glad we're doing this. I'm just, like I said, I'm
Mhm.
writing down so much. You're like, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love this
I've
conversation.
I've done a lot of reflecting, just kind of with COVID and everything, and just like you're exactly right. Just kind of like the shift that is needed in education, and those questions that we need to be asking ourselves as teachers. And like currently, right now, I'm not in a classroom, but I'm a tech coach. And I thought, if I was to go back into the classroom, like I would just kind of secretly do away with that whole do away with the schedule and
Right.
just and just make it fit and focus on
Right.
what the kids are interested in, right?
Right.
And just kind
Right.
of weave everything in that way. And I think that would just
Right.
make learning so much more purposeful and engaging for students.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and they'll be happy. I mean, of course, you're always going to have kids who are um, either because they're so used to the system,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to feel powerless. Be like, wait, if you don't lay it out for me, I don't know
Yeah.
where to go, right? And so like you have to kind of retrain some people.
Mm-hmm.
You know how to
Um,
play school.
yeah, like it's an interesting problem. Like you get so brainwashed, really. Like you get so used to like well, then what are we supposed to do? Like like that's one of the big questions that I think a lot of faculty need to deal with. Like how do what does accountability look like when we have academic freedom?
Yeah.
Like that could take you 3 years to figure out if you really worked on it as a faculty. And like that's the other thing that I always really try to talk about whenever I'm talking to professionals like yourselves. Like it's the I think the probably the key is a self study. Like each of you initiate a self study with your school and give yourselves 3 years to do it and do like you're doing like for this coursework, right? Like in the same way that you would write up like a sample, action research plan or whatever, or like what was the? It's not. It's what's the other word? It's like an embedded inquiry project, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like you're in the situation that you're studying and you're influencing the very results because you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that would be so powerful. What ends up happening is like we read an article and we talk about it, and then like maybe one teacher like does a cool project, but like instead like to like actively research yourselves and study yourselves and see what and create data so that you can use that to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't read someone else's study and say, hey, we should do this. Like if you like their methodology, then copy their methodology, but then apply it to your own school and your own families and your own faculty, right? That's to me like the biggest mistake that I've seen schools do over and over again. They just read someone else's study and figure they can just import the results. Like, what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hello? Isn't that to me, that was like the first class in the doctoral program Like I could have taken the class in 5 minutes because basically the summary of the class was you cannot import results from any external source. Okay, I get an A in the class now because that was like the point of the class, right? And yet so many school sites do exactly that. Let's read this book over the summer and we'll talk about it. And then what? What did you notice that really not that much changed? Yeah, there's a reason for that. It's like because you didn't do a study on yourselves. You didn't research yourselves. You just try to import a conclusion from somewhere else.
And that's what we try to teach kids to do too, right? Learn for themselves and all that. So we should kind of practice what we preach for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So that's I don't know how I got on that. Tom. I'm looking back at the questions here, but
No, it's great.
That's good conversation.
We can lead on to the next question. I really found it powerful, Bryan, when you said that there's no place for coding or makerspace for it in the curriculum, yet there is a need for it. And my next question would lead, actually, this would lead up to the next question, that how can we help our teachers to take a step forward and take the risk to look at makerspaces and coding and some ways that they could actually incorporate that into their classrooms?
yeah, that's a $1 million question. I think I mean, assuming that you didn't do, okay, let's just say you didn't do your own self-study, right? Like, so you just woke up tomorrow and like walk into school and you're like, how do you pitch this? It's a faculty meeting, right? I guess I would probably do like 10-minute demonstration of, and you teacher talk, doing your metacognitive, step by step, why you're making the choices you're making in, making something. Say you could use. I've seen a lot of great stuff like with Turtle Art. Turtle Art's a really great program, and it's so natural that you could very easily talk through why you're doing what you're doing, and just let that sort of sit there. Or you could do you could program a quick little machine in Minecraft, right? And you could talk through the steps that you're taking. And I think just like a 10-minute short, letting teachers just observe it and listening to you speak about why you did what you did, and then when things go wrong, talk about, oh, isn't that interesting how this didn't behave as I expected it to behave, and then talking through what you're doing to try to debug that and make it work correctly, right? And then stop, and then let a conversation ensue about what has just been witnessed, right? And I guess you probably need a little. I mean, it depends on your faculty. If they would just if they need some protocols in order to participate, then I guess I would do that first, right? I think there's a great set of protocols. The Critical Friends group, if you don't know that, you could download their materials. Critical Friends group, they have, I don't know, 50, 100 different protocols for professionals to work more efficiently. That's a place I would be more efficient, for professionals to work more efficiently together in conversation about education, about ideas in education, about like when you're not in a graduate class together, right? But you're at the workplace, you need some rules. You gotta have, otherwise it's just like blathering on. So I would set some rules in place, do a 10-minute demo, do your teacher talk metacognitively, talk through what happened. Even if it fails at the end, that's still great. It doesn't really matter. It's that you are able to talk about these things and then let them discuss. I think that would be so much better than, hey, coding is really good for kids' brains. Like, what? Don't pitch it, don't sell it, just show it. In the same way that you would teach somebody who's never done it before, you want to show them, right? So you're going to do a 10-minute demo, and then they're going to spend the next 2 weeks trying to do that, but then go push beyond it, right? Isn't that so?
Mm-hmm.
So that I think just like building a culture at a school where you can do those kinds of things would be probably the first step. Because anything else, it just looks like, hey, that's a cool little robot you made there. It's like, hey, and that I could use that to clean my floors. Like these are the kinds of comments like, oh, I would, you know what? Can you make it serve me coffee? Like I could really use a coffee in the middle of my teaching day. Like right, yeah, but right. So you see, like the shift from looking at this product that I can buy and have kids do the kit versus look at all the listen and watch the thinking that I go through in trying to make this with a computer how I try to make my idea, which is invisible, it's just in my head, how I try to make it visible. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that debugging process is the best. And even getting rid of the word mistake or error, like these are, like, I mean, I get it. Like I say the word mistake all the time, but like really, like when I am talking to kids, I try to talk about this very thing of like, well, let's try to, like, let me try to get into your head of what you saw in your head. And now let's talk about what steps you took to make that thing get out of your head. Right? Mm-hmm. Oh, and then look right here. Isn't that an interesting thing you did? Why did you make that move right there? Like, and then that to me is like exactly what every teacher's doing in every discipline. But here's an immersive place for us to do it that draws together so many different topics that get siloed, and then the other benefit of it is that, like, well, if we're all teaching this kind of thinking, but we're all teaching it towards like 6 different goals during the day, what was the point of that? Like, if we're all teaching thinking, right? Why couldn't the 6 classes all get together and come up with a much bigger project? Since we're all teaching thinking and how to think and how to, make the invisible visible, why aren't we combining these 6 content areas into one much bigger project? Mm. Right? So that's the other part that really bugs me. It's like, what? No pun intended with bugs. But like, right? But like, that's so strange. Like, why can't there just, why? It's like so, right? When you get into the room with teachers, you're like, well, you compare all your rubrics and you compare your assessments and you compare your strategies. Like, you're kind of all doing the same thing, but just with different topics. Mm.
Yeah.
Right?
I know. I kind of think that we need to do more with like pre-service teachers, because sometimes when a teacher gets into the classroom, they're just trying to survive. They're, going to teachers pay teachers, or they're just keeping their head above, oh, where's that binder? I think if we did more pre-service teachers and let them experience it themselves, so then when it's teaching, it was already kind of a skill they've been working on, and that I think that would move things so much farther ahead, but it's not there yet. That's why a conversation like this is amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You got it right there. I mean, giving more space for teachers as they're becoming teachers to do these things with other people who are becoming teachers, right? Like the learning experience of beginning teachers, pre-service teachers, like, it is far more about survival and making sure you take these required classes. And like my wife, when she became a teacher, one of her required classes was in logo.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, I'll never use this. I'm going to teach high school English. This is ridiculous. Why am I making kaleidoscopic line drawings with a triangle? And like, I look back at it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, how awesome if that had continued. Yeah. What if?
There's some poetry there for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you think here, you guys? Should it does look like we have 3 more questions. Do you think we should whittle them down to do 1 more, 2 more?
What do you think? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm free today. You might want to get to your Thanksgiving.
We can keep going. I this next one might be a big one, and I feel like you could probably talk about it for another 2 hours, Brian. The
I'll
next
try to
question.
be brief.
This next one is: what is your definition of constructionism?
Constructionism. Yeah, I I think that um, I don't. I almost don't need the term constructionism. I like it. I and I'm a Papert follower. Um, I don't. It didn't. What I'm concerned about with it, I think, is that it doesn't necessarily indicate for a lot of people that you do this other thing that I was talking about before, that you construct your mind, you create the ideas, you co-create the ideas. I know there's plenty of writing about it. I'm sure that people say yes, in constructionism you can make ideas and you can make things in your head, and you can also make computer programs and robots, and you can make whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Um, but I'm also I think that like it's sort of like a philosophical debate for me, like because the more than it is an exact term that did something new, because the constructivist model and concept already makes room for really anything to exist, to be made, and to be collaborated on, to be made together. So it wasn't like people weren't making things that were physical in the world before the term constructionism, right? But it was definitely like this split to try to demonstrate that we needed to be more intentional about that constructivism isn't only about having great conversations with kids. It isn't only about helping them to work together so that they can solve big problems that exist in the abstract mind, right? So I get why we needed it. We needed to encourage people who weren't already making things in the physical world a little nudge towards, well, yeah, this constructivist thing is cool, but it isn't just like a philosophy class. Like we're actually talking about kids, creating objects and stuff and workable machines or things in entrepreneurial, like things that they could sell in the world, right? So like, so my concern with it is just that it's just that like what does that say about people? Like we needed another word to help us think about actually making stuff in the world. I don't know. So I didn't really get it. Like, I mean, I get it, but I don't really get why it has to be so different from constructivism, because to me it's not. That constructionism contains everything that constructivism contains. It's not like if Seymour Papert were in this conversation, I'm sure he would argue with me, which this is great. And I think, but he developed it like to split from Piaget's idea. Yeah. Right, so I get that, and like I get why the world needed that to be more explicit about, making things. Anyway, so it's. I guess you need it, but I'm concerned that we need it. Like, what does that say about us that we need it? Like, that's the part that kind of bugs me. Like, why isn't it enough to just have the term constructivism and we all just make things with it? To be a constructionist means you're still a constructivist who makes things, but a constructivist who isn't a constructionist is still making things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Right?
I know
I put
it's
a star by
semantic,
that on
it's
my
philosophical.
yeah,
it's right. Like so, I mean, it's funny. Like I don't really, I don't know. Like I'm okay with. I think the thing that, the part where there's probably the split, it come like more recently conversations I've had about this is like, well, if you, what about in just, something simple like writing a computer program? Like, so the constructionist view of writing a computer program might be that you're involved in that debugging process more, but the constructivist view might just be about collaborating on the vision of what the program is. It's like, okay, I guess, but it just honestly, it feels very semantic and philosophical. Like, I can't imagine if we're already involved in the process of making something, it doesn't really matter if we're constructionist or constructivist.
That's a good point.
You've already bought into the notion that we should do this together, we should collaborate, and we should and that your one idea is going to be changed by virtue of the fact that you're working with others. Right? You've already bought into that. So it doesn't really matter what you're making or what you call yourselves. So I don't know, it just becomes very academic at a certain point.
Yeah. No, and that's a really good point. I know that I still kind of struggle trying to differentiate that difference and that line kind of between constructionism and constructivism. So, but yeah,
it's hard to say sometimes.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, on the quiz,
yeah,
you'll get it wrong if you say that constructivism is about making things.
Yeah.
Because constructionism is supposed to be about making things. Like, okay.
Yeah.
In one of our readings, I think the difference was that in constructionism, you reflect on your bugs when you're debugging, but my question would be, when you are a constructivist, you have to do the same thing. Otherwise, you cannot move on to the next level. So,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, I'm okay with it not being such a big deal. I've actually had people say, like, I'm a constructionist. I'm like, cool, me too. But whatever.
It's all good.
Yeah, for sure. So my timer did pop up here. So again,
man, where does the time go?
This is good. I'm thankful for this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's very good.
Absolutely.
So we have 6 minutes left.
Sure.
Do we want to try to pound through one more question?
Sure.
Or you can just give them the open end. We can do the open-ended one and let Bryan kind of take us home.
I'll look at the last two here as well. Yeah,
I'm an EAL teacher, so I would really be interested in your opinion, how this is related to our EAL world and how it can be incorporated.
I'm not in a rush, so I'm cool with that for sure.
Yeah, I think that what's so wonderful about all these kinds of things that we're talking about doing here, is that there is no, like, the entry level. The barriers to entry are very, very low, or maybe non-existent. Whereas, teaching language to somebody who's especially since they're probably not being immersed in it, right? Like, the best way to learn a language, of course, is to live in that country, or if in that neighborhood where that's the only thing you hear, like, you would learn it quickly. So the same thing applies here, right? So if you're going to learn how to think as a computational thinker, if you're going to learn how to think as a constructivist or constructionist, then the best way to do that is to be immersed in these kinds of projects. Now, if the primary language being used in those projects, in those contexts, is one that's foreign to you, well, that shouldn't be an issue, because now you look at all this great motivation you have to learn it, because you care about the project, right? The thing that you're making is the thing that you are actually focused on, and and then you're immersed in all these people's language. They're speaking about something that you understand because you could see it. Like, this is, if you put it, I'd probably put it in Minecraft, to be honest, because it's immersive and collaborative and in real time. And, and then like have like a Discord channel or whatever, where everyone's talking to each other, however you want to talk, or if you're physically in the classroom, however you're talking, right? The talk is going to be about the project, and so somebody whose language is different from the primary language in the room, they'll hear repeatedly the same kinds of words, like they're standing in front of some redstone and pressure plate and a dispenser, and they've never encountered those words before, but they're going to hear everyone talking about pressure plate, redstone, and the dispenser. Guess what? They're going to start figuring out how to now go and get the redstone, pressure plate, and dispenser from their inventory, and then they'll see the word, right, printed when they get it, and then they'll have heard it 10 times in the last minute. Now, they probably know that word, and they've associated it with an object that they can now use in this virtual, immersive, collaborative space, right? So it happens so naturally. It's like you basically create, like that was like Pavart's whole thing about making math land, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have to create this world where that's the language. And then everyone will learn that language, because like you in the way that we mostly teach a second language or a third language or whatever, additional language, right, is you show up to that class for an hour once 5 days a week, and then somebody has some lessons, and you do the skits, and like I still remember lots of things that I did in my Spanish classes in high school, like great times. But like I'm not fluent in Spanish. I can understand it, I can speak it, but I'm not fluent. I could read it and figure it out, but I'm not fluent, right? So what was the measure of my success? Like these quizzes and tests, right? So no wonder I'm not fluent, because I didn't really have an immersive experience. Like most, like as much as we could, we were speaking anything but Spanish in the class, because what was our goal? What was our motivation? Like to get an A? That's not really a great motivation. But if my motivation is I'm going to build the most fantastic universe with 30 of my friends, and that's the goal, like, okay, wow, now we're talking, and you get to design all the features of this world and have anything you want have happen. It's like, wow, wait, I'm learning Spanish? Yeah, you will, along the way. Mm-hmm. Along the way. Right? So those are the things that are so fascinating. Like that's what, Pavart's ideas are still radical, strangely enough. Like, because, we have never really shaped or reshaped the classroom to be as immersive as it could be. And then, and learning language is, we already know, like, why do kids learn languages so easily? Like when, because they're just around, they listen to it and they pick it up. Yeah, they're just messing around. Like they just hear, like, well, I know these words, I've heard them, and I associate it with some objects and some actions, some behaviors, day after day after day after day after day. And next thing you know, you're speaking. It's like a magical. It's like whoo. It's like next thing you know, you're speaking that language. It's like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Right. So like that's what I.
It was a byproduct of the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's a byproduct. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what's so fascinating.